Following the end of the Cold War, dozens of new countries were recognized worldwide, mostly emerging from the former Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. Since then, however, the pace of new national recognitions has slowed considerably. In the 21st century, only a few new countries have achieved widespread recognition, with the most recent being South Sudan in 2011. Still, many regions around the globe continue to push for independence and recognition as sovereign states. Today, we're going to examine 5 such areas that might soon become new countries. Of all the areas we'll discuss today, Bougainville is the one most likely to become a new country in the near future. In theory, its independence is a done deal, pending only parliamentary approval. Bougainville has been inhabited for nearly 30,000 years, but its modern quest for independence began with its colonization by the Germans in the 1880s. Before colonization, there was no external power from which to declare independence. The German Empire claimed New Guinea and, together with the British Empire, eyed the neighboring Solomon Islands. An agreement between the two powers divided the Solomon Islands, and Bougainville became a part of German New Guinea. After World War I, the Australians occupied German New Guinea, and a League of Nations mandate officially placed the territory of New Guinea under Australian control. Bougainville's strategic importance was underscored in 1969, when one of the largest copper ore deposits was discovered on the island. The island's ore deposits contain roughly 1 billion tons of copper and 12 million ounces of gold. Bougainville Copper Limited was created to mine these resources, and workers from offshore flooded the island to work in the mines. Meanwhile, Australia had been gradually preparing Papua New Guinea for self-governance and independence, a process that culminated peacefully in 1975 when Papua New Guinea officially became independent. However, Bougainville shared little in common with the Papua New Guinea mainland. Its people grew resentful not only of the copper mine, which they viewed as exploitation of their homeland, but also of the socio-economic changes brought on by the influx of mainland miners. Bougainville Copper Limited accounted for nearly 50% of Papua New Guinea's export revenue, with much of the profit flowing directly to the national government, which owned 20% of the company. In stark contrast, the indigenous population of Bougainville received only about 1% of the total profits of the mine. The environmental damage, refusal to share financial benefits, and perceived negative societal impacts from the mainland miners eventually pushed the people of Bougainville to seek secession from Papua New Guinea. Government forces repeatedly suppressed independence activists, which led to a decades-long civil war from 1988 through to 1998. Over the course of the conflict, it is estimated that between 15,000 and 20,000 Bougainvilleans were killed, nearly 10% of the island's total population, while only 300 members of the Papua New Guinea Defence Force lost their lives, though thousands were injured. New Zealand later helped broker peace between Bougainville and the Papua New Guinea mainland. The formal peace agreement called for the creation of an autonomous Bougainville government, which was fully established in 2000. A key provision of the agreement allowed Bougainville to hold a non-binding referendum on independence within 20 years of forming its autonomous government. That vote finally took place in December 2019, and the results were overwhelming. An astonishing 98% of Bougainvilleans voted for independence, with an 87% voter turnout. Although the referendum was non-binding, discussions between governments are underway to make Bougainville's independence a reality. The island's president has set a deadline of 2027 for full transition, though the independence vote still awaits ratification from the Papua New Guinea Parliament. While the Papua New Guinea government appears inclined to grant independence, its prime minister has expressed a desire for a slower timeline. Nevertheless, barring any surprising decisions in parliament, it seems likely that Bougainville will become its own country within the next few years. While Bougainville is the most likely candidate for a new country, Rojava is probably the least likely one that we'll discuss today. Located in northeastern Syria, Rojava is officially known as the Democratic Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, though it is not recognized as an official autonomous region. Predominantly populated by Kurds, the name Rojava comes from the Kurdish term for Syrian Kurdistan, a topic that we will revisit shortly. Rojava emerged as a de facto autonomous zone during the ongoing Syrian civil war, which began in 2011. Kurdish forces quickly seized control of several cities with Kurdish majorities and drafted their own constitution for self-governance. Throughout the conflict, Rojava has faced not only the Syrian armed forces, but also ISIS. To date, Rojava is credited with being the only force to successfully and comprehensively defeat ISIS in a ground conflict, largely driving them out of the region. The government of Rojava is often regarded as the closest thing to an anarchist state that the world has ever seen, though it is best described as a libertarian socialist government. It operates through a communal system that lacks the typical hierarchical structures of conventional governments, and there is no official police force. Instead, local law enforcement is managed by the Civil Defense Forces, decentralized neighborhood watch groups that patrol the communities for criminal activity or potential attacks by ISIS or other hostile forces. These groups are typically armed, and many members carry radios to contact the military if they encounter any invasions or threats. Rojava's system of government is seen by many as a radical experiment, and the Kurds are determined to maintain Rojava's autonomy from Syria. However, they have explicitly stated that they do not seek full independence for Rojava. So, well then, why is Rojava on this list if it is not pursuing independence? Well, the situation with the Kurds extends beyond Rojava alone. As mentioned earlier, the name Rojava is derived from the Kurdish term for Syrian Kurdistan, which is part of a larger Kurdistan region spanning parts of Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. With an estimated population of between 30 and 45 million, Kurds form the largest stateless ethnic group in the world, and many aspire to establish Kurdistan as its own nation. Realizing an independent Kurdistan would be an enormous challenge, as it would require seizing territory from all four of the aforementioned nations. While Iraq has an official autonomous zone for the Kurds and Syria maintains a de facto autonomous region, Iran refuses to recognize any Kurdish autonomy, and Turkey has militantly opposed it. In fact, one of the main reasons Rojava is not seeking full independence is the near certainty that such a move would trigger an immediate invasion by Turkey. The situation has grown even more volatile. In December 2024, the regime of Syria's Bashar al-Assad, a leader widely regarded as a totalitarian dictator, was overthrown. The upheaval has created significant uncertainty about the future of Rojava. It is possible that the emerging political climate could make full independence a more attractive option for its residents. Similar to the Kurds, the Tuaregs are a stateless ethnic group in Africa who inhabit an area spanning multiple national borders, particularly in northern Mali. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the period known as the Scramble for Africa, about 90% of the continent was colonized by European powers. One of the areas claimed by France was French Sudan, which, after several name changes, became the autonomous state of Mali in 1958. 2 years later, Mali gained independence from France and was recognized as its own country. Once Mali became independent, the Tuareg, along with Berber and Arab populations in the region, expected to form their own independent state, which they called Azawad. When this didn't happen, it led to a Tuareg rebellion against the Malian government beginning in 1962. That first rebellion was disorganized, lacking unified leadership or a coherent plan, and it ultimately was unsuccessful. Subsequent rebellions in the 90s and 2000s also failed to achieve lasting change, but a renewed uprising in 2012 showed signs of progress. During the 2012 rebellion, the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad took control of northern Mali, including major cities such as Timbuktu, Kidal, and Gao. They unilaterally declared independence, though this move was not recognized by the international community. Unfortunately for the Tuaregs, their declared independence was short-lived. During their conflict with the Malian government, the Tuaregs aligned with the Islamist group Ansar Dine, which had ties to al-Qaeda. Though this alliance helped them gain control of the region in the short term, al-Qaeda soon co-opted the movement, attempting to transform Azawad into an extremist Islamic state and expand their control over all of Mali. In response, the Malian army, supported by forces from France and Chad, managed to recapture northern Mali and end the rebellion. A peace deal was reached in 2013 that granted the Tuaregs greater autonomy. A referendum was scheduled for 2017 to further increase autonomy and officially rename the northern region as Azawad, but that vote never took place. Even though there has not been another large-scale rebellion since 2012, insurgency and calls for independence continue. The region has grown increasingly unstable, particularly after the Malian government experienced coups in 2020 and 2021. French soldiers were expelled from Mali, and Russian soldiers from the Wagner Group were invited in instead. Amidst all this chaos, the Tuaregs have regained control of most of northern Mali. Should their territory extend once again to include Timbuktu and Gao, they may attempt to declare Azawad as an independent nation. If that happens, the international response will be critical. Will foreign nations intervene to suppress the rebellion, or will they recognize Azawad as a sovereign state this time around? The group of islands known as New Caledonia, located off the eastern coast of Australia, first came to European attention when British explorer James Cook spotted them in 1774. The northeast portion of the largest island reminded him of Scotland, so he named it New Caledonia, after the name given to Scotland by the Roman Empire. Somewhat ironic twist in the history of colonization, isn't it? New Caledonia remained of little interest to Europeans for several decades, until the South Pacific became a source of enslaved people. There are also accounts of British missionaries and American crews being murdered and cannibalized by the native inhabitants. In 1853, Napoleon III decided that New Caledonia was to belong to France. At that time, there were between 50,000 and 60,000 indigenous people known as the Kanaks living on the islands, but Napoleon sent only a small group of French settlers, asserting that New Caledonia was now a part of France. A decade later, the island was established as a French penal colony, and over the next 20 years, roughly 10,000 convicts were sent there. In the same year that it became a penal colony, large deposits of nickel were discovered on the island. Much like Bougainville, New Caledonia's natural resources began to be heavily mined, yet the indigenous population received little of the financial benefits. Instead, they suffered greatly as outbreaks of smallpox and measles, diseases introduced by the Europeans, wiped out over half of the Kanak population. The Kanaks were eventually confined to reservations, leading to multiple unsuccessful rebellions. After World War II, the French government extended citizenship to all residents of New Caledonia, and the islands began focusing more on trade with nearby Australia. Over time, the indigenous population returned to its pre-colonization levels, re-establishing itself as the largest ethnic group on the islands. Throughout this period, many in New Caledonia desired independence from France. Between 1976 and 1988, a series of armed conflicts erupted, culminating in a hostage crisis in the Rojava cave just days before the 1988 French presidential election. During the crisis, Kanak militants killed 4 French police officers and took 27 others hostage until the military assaulted the cave, killing 19 of the hostage takers. This chain of events ultimately led to the Matignon Agreement, a 10-year deal designed to improve conditions on the islands while granting amnesty to those involved on both sides of the crisis. The basic idea was that the Kanaks would refrain from discussing independence for a decade, while the French government would work to make New Caledonia an attractive place to live, thereby reducing the desire for independence. Once the 10-year period ended, the Namur Accord was signed. This accord established a 20-year transition during which New Caledonia would gain increased political power and autonomy, and it provided for 3 referendums on whether to pursue independence. The first vote was held in 2018, with 56.7% of voters choosing to remain with France. The second vote, in October 2020, saw that figure drop slightly to 53.4%. Momentum appeared to be shifting toward independence, for the third vote scheduled for December 2021. However, COVID-19 had disproportionately affected the Kanak population, who largely supported independence. The resulting traditional period of mourning was expected to lower voter turnout, prompting pro-independence groups to lobby for a postponement of the vote. While the French government refused to delay the referendum, these groups organized a boycott instead. The vote to remain with France ultimately passed with 96.5% approval, but the turnout was only 43.9%, a significant decline from the 85.7% seen the previous year. This low turnout suggests that the result was still up for debate and that independence might have prevailed under different circumstances. Nevertheless, French President Emmanuel Macron declared that the will of the people of New Caledonia was clear and that the territory would remain under French rule. Yet the story doesn't end there. Pro-independence groups have been striving to have the 2021 vote invalidated, even petitioning the International Court of Justice to weigh in on the matter, although the court has yet to announce whether it will hear the case. Despite the situation being less violent than it was prior to 1988 and during the Matignon Agreements, protests and riots have continued since the third referendum. At this point, the prospect of an independent New Caledonia seems only a matter of time. The remaining question is whether France will agree to another referendum in the near future, or only after decades have passed. Our last entry today concerns a country that once existed and may potentially exist again. The region of Yemen has a complex history, often marked by fragmentation and contestation among different tribes. The situation was no less complicated following the period of colonization by the Ottomans and the British. None of the Ottomans were eager to be assigned to Yemen, so only the worst and most corrupt officials ended up governing there, and they were constantly at odds with local tribes. In contrast, British rule in the Aden Protectorate centered around the vital port city of Aden and was relatively more orderly, though it too faced significant opposition from Arab nationalists. After World War I and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, North Yemen emerged as the Mutawalakite Kingdom of Yemen. A civil war in the 60s subsequently overthrew the government, and the area became known as the Yemen Arab Republic, commonly referred to as North Yemen. During this period, the British were in the process of decolonizing South Yemen, recognizing that they could no longer manage the region effectively. They attempted to create a federation of the various Arab tribes, but with increasing influence from the Eastern Bloc, South Yemen officially became the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen in 1967, the only communist state in the Middle East. Unlike other regions divided by communism, such as West and East Germany, North and South Korea, and North and South Vietnam, North and South Yemen generally experienced peaceful coexistence. There was a couple of Yemeni civil wars in the 1970s, but these conflicts were short-lived and ultimately ended with discussions about unifying the two countries. In 1990, that unification became a reality, and North and South Yemen merged to form the single nation of Yemen. However, in 2014, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels seized control of Yemen's capital, Sana'a, triggering the still ongoing Yemeni civil war. Multiple factions are fighting in this civil war, though three are considerably larger than the others. First, there are the Iranian-backed Houthis, who claim to be the legitimate government of Yemen. Second, there is the Saudi-backed Republic of Yemen, which is the official government recognized by the United Nations. Both of these factions aim to control the entire region of Yemen. The third major faction is the Southern Transitional Council, supported by the UAE. This separatist group seeks to secede and re-establish the nation of South Yemen. While peace talks appeared to be making progress in 2022 and 2023, violence has only escalated since then. It's impossible to predict the ultimate outcome of the Yemeni civil war at this point, but history suggests that the deep cultural and political differences across the region make it difficult to sustain a single, unified state of Yemen.